prophecy so accurately. I said, well, do you remember Greg Williams? He said, no, but I remember his father.
Mm-hmm.
His father was probably the brightest man I have ever seen, ever known.
But all
And he
over
was
the
drunk.
place. Yeah,
He was out on the streets. You'd run into him. He would be drunk and, just, but he was so bright. He said, I remember his father.
That's fascinating. Well, I driving over, what struck me most forcefully about the book is all of the things we said about it. But then, it's not just a simple American success story. It's not just, gee, if you work hard and are, do your best and say your prayers, you will,
But you see what you were saying about his father. See, I frequently tell people, what I look for when I look for employees, I look for someone, one or the other. I'll take hard work over brightness, because bright and lazy doesn't get it. And that's, and not necessarily that his father was lazy, but his father was bright. But
I have to be successful.
But do you think it came from his father? I mean, was he living out his father's dream?
Or reacting against his father's drunkenness.
But
But
didn't
he
his
reacted-
father want to be a lawyer?
I honestly don't remember. I think
I think that, but I don't remember that.
I don't remember.
See, I think that Miss Dora had a tremendous impact
Yeah.
on him, but his father had much more of an impact, I would say, on the brother.
on the brother. But
Mike.
why?
I mean, I don't know that, but the brother went the way of the father, and the way of the street, and here Greg was. It happened, and I'll bet 99 and 9/10% of the students who show up on this campus have not had the life, as tough a life as this young man. See, that's
To
what
the point of it, if he can come through it, then you can too. But let me throw the monkey wrench in. There are no free lunches. There are no guarantees.
But we know that he made that decision, and that provided some structure in his life also.
This is a wonderful book to use when you're talking about the dad in it. That is a sort of spark that told him, gee. And the fact that someone at a teaching institution, a faculty member at a university, took a personal interest in him and really helped him out. Without that sort of thing, which, we say, and I think probably it's basically right, goes on.
Okay. I'll say, I couldn't put it down.
Yeah.
Track them, but it's very difficult.
What percentage of them are academically disqualified?
We're trying to figure that out now, because there is a large number of them that have been admitted that are not very academically talented, and there's no.
Let's continue on with your discussion, all right?
Okay.
So, what appealed to you about this book, Life on the Color Line?
Well, I thought Greg Williams sends a very powerful message to us about you may be living in some very tough times. There may be many, many obstacles in your way. However, if you're bright and if you work hard, you can be very successful. And as I was thinking about our incoming students for the 1998-99 academic year, it seemed to me that many of them will have faced many obstacles. But very few will have faced the obstacles that Greg Williams has faced. And if you read this book, you can say, if he can do it, so can I. So I think that's a very powerful message for our students to get from the book. Also, I did give book report to a class on all four of the books that we were looking at before our last session. And several of the students had read some of the books. But the overwhelming choice of the students was Greg Williams' book. And so that reinforced my thought about the book, and so I was very supportive, as you know, at our meeting.
Okay.
Perfect. Okay, Inga, are you ready? You need Larry to finish what he just.
I have to think back.
Students were really, the students overwhelmingly.
Oh, yes, the students overwhelmingly voted for this book.
Well, I couldn't put it down. I picked it up and read it. I'd read 2 of the other books and just was fascinated. I found, even though I'm white and a female, I identified with Greg Williams. We're very close in age, and so we were seeing the same culture, the same events, but from a very different perspective, and to get inside his mind and to see so graphically how he dealt with a lot of the issues I was dealing with, just was wonderful. And now I talk to my daughter, who's 16, about what life was like during the 50s and during the 60s and when I was growing up, and she just is amazed because she sees it from the 90s perspective. And it's really helped her when I've talked about Greg Williams and what it was like in Muncie during the 50s and 60s, for her to go, oh, it couldn't have happened that way. No way. No one would act that way. But it did. Life goes on. Cultures change. Doesn't mean that you still don't have challenges. You still have really serious decisions to make about who you are and who you are going to be. But the context is so different. And so I think it's been fun talking to her about it, and have enjoyed those discussions. It's a kind of book that makes you want to talk to people about it. I talked to Carl Kaiser, who is an African American and chair of the Muncie School Board at this point. And he talked about reading the book, and he said, oh, I was up all night. I sent it to my sister, who was in school with Greg Williams. And it is so real, it's so accurate in terms of what it was like in Muncie at that time. So a lot of people identify with it, and everybody wants to talk about it.
Terrific. Just continue to talk.
Right.
Say your name is spelled, just so I get you just a couple words there.
Tony Edmonds.
So I always have to turn you down. Thank you. So I was planning on it.
I don't understand. I was an only child. I didn't have to yell when I was a kid.
Go ahead.
Inga, you talk about the Muncie setting, and to me that is one of the key things about the book. It is set in the local community. 90% of Ball State freshmen come from Indiana. A large percentage of those come from within 50 miles of Muncie. So they're reading a book about something they either have or are going to experience. So there's that immediate hook for them. But what I love about this book that you and Larry both alluded to is it goes beyond the local community. It takes the students out of the cave. They do go to wider and broader questions. What is it to be a success? How do you become a success? Why did Greg Williams become a success and his brother not become a success? These are fascinating questions. And even beyond that, it deals with a central issue in American history and American society today, and that is the issue of race. On the color line, Greg Williams was born white, but became black. How do you know what your color is? How do you know what race means? What determines race? These are the kinds of questions that I think it's absolutely crucial for our students who maybe think coming in as 18-year-old freshmen, well, I know what this is and I know what that is, to immediately be confronted with a book that makes them question and makes them ask broader sorts of inquiries that take them outside of themselves. And I think that's what this book really does, focusing on the issue of race. The assumption is that the key variable is...
I'm ready now. If Tony, you'd like to prompt a little.
Oh, I'm all set to go.
Okay.
So Tony, you mentioned that many of our students come to Ball State from within 50 miles. I came to Ball State from 70 miles away. I was born and bred in Fort Wayne. I'm a lifelong resident of Indiana, and as such, I've been haunted really by the fact that long before Greg Williams came to Indiana, the state was already famous for the Ku Klux Klan, for instance, for lynchings. As early as high school in Fort Wayne, I began to see that matters of color are really very subtle and complicated. In our high school, we had about 1,500 students. 5 of those were black. We imported 2 young men because they were basketball stars. Another young man got along well in the student body because he was a very good drummer in the school band. 2 young women were essentially faceless. They did not play basketball, they did not play in the band. They simply agonized through 4 years of high school and disappeared. It seems to me that this book illustrates really well the way people's local lives can become very confused, can become very difficult, can become destroyed sometimes, or become very destructive, because we're living within patterns which actually are national in scope. And the question is, so I'm quote white, I'm male, I'm nearing 60. I belong to one of the most powerful classes in the United States, but the fact is that my personal history has also been touched by these patterns of gender, these patterns of color, patterns of sexual orientation, patterns of religion, all of which are subject to the problems of prejudice and discrimination. So the question is, how can Greg Williams deal with that? How can a Tom Kuntz deal with that? Well, for one thing, we enter a community of people who are dedicated to thoughtfulness and to becoming informed and to learning from each other, and we work this out together.
Very good. Very
Self.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of like the hero who goes out into the world, but
Yeah.
maybe we don't need to
Well,
because that.
Right, so finally it comes back for each of us to the question of who am I, and who am I as a member of a community, and who are those people in that community as they relate to me.